Imagine this. A crowded school hallway, a bully shoving a new girl against the wall while everyone laughs. But what no one knows is that this quiet girl isn't ordinary. Her father isn't just any parent, he's one of the most feared and powerful men in the entire city. And when he finds out what happened, the bully's entire world is about to collapse. Stick around, because this is a story you'll never forget. The hallway was alive with noise. Lockers slammed open and shut, sneakers squeaked against the polished floors, and laughter echoed through the long corridor. It was just another busy morning at Ridgeway High. Students were swapping books, talking about homework, and gossiping about weekend plans. But suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch, the energy shifted. The laughter died down, the chatter faded, and eyes turned toward the far end of the hallway. Something was happening, and everyone could feel it. There, by the yellow brick wall, a scene was unfolding that made the entire school hold its breath. Jason Miller, the tall, blonde-haired boy known by everyone as the school's most feared bully, had cornered a new student. His reputation preceded him, teachers couldn't control him, students feared him, and even the principal avoided direct confrontation. Jason thrived on intimidation, and today, he had found a new target. The girl's name was Amara King. She had just transferred to Ridgeway High a week ago. Quiet, reserved, and serious, she was the type of student who kept to herself. She didn't laugh loudly in the cafeteria or compete for attention in class. Instead, she sat quietly, observing. And to Jason, that quiet confidence looked like weakness, an easy opportunity to remind everyone who ruled the hallways. Jason shoved Amara back against the cold brick wall. The sound of her shoulders hitting it echoed down the hall, sending a ripple of shock through the crowd. Students gathered quickly, forming a circle. Jason's friends smirked, excited to watch their leader put someone in their place. Jason leaned in close, his voice dripping with mockery. "Think you can just walk in here and act tough?" he sneered. His friends chuckled, egging him on. "Yeah, show her who's boss, Jason." But Amara didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't even look away. Instead, her dark eyes locked onto Jason's with an icy calmness that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Jason expected fear, he lived off it. But what he saw in Amara's gaze wasn't fear at all. It was control. Strength. And it sent a chill down his spine. The silence was almost louder than any scream could have been. Around them, whispers broke out in the crowd. "Why isn't she scared? She's not even moving. What's wrong with her? Doesn't she know who Jason is?" But Amara knew exactly what Jason was. A bully. And she had seen men like him before, louder, crueler, and far more dangerous than a high school kid with something to prove. What Jason didn't know was that Amara's calmness wasn't an act. It was something she had been taught since childhood. Her father had raised her to never show weakness, to never bow her head, and to never let fear control her. Because in her world, fear was a luxury no one could afford. Her father wasn't just any man. His name was Dante King. A man whose reputation stretched far beyond the walls of Ridgeway High. In the city's darkest corners, his name was spoken only in whispers. Some called him a businessman. Others called him a criminal mastermind. But everyone agreed on one thing: Dante King was powerful, dangerous, and untouchable. And Amara, though just a teenager, carried that strength within her. She stood tall, her back pressed against the wall, her eyes unyielding. The longer Jason stared into those eyes, the more he felt his confidence slip. His bravado began to crack, though he tried to cover it with more aggression. "What, cat got your tongue?" Jason barked, gripping her jacket tighter. Still, Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any insult she could have thrown back. Inside, Jason's stomach twisted. Why wasn't she reacting? Why wasn't she scared like the others? For the first time, Jason felt something unfamiliar: doubt. But Jason, too arrogant to back down in front of his friends, pushed harder. "Say something," he growled, his voice trembling ever so slightly. And then, finally, Amara spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and sharp enough to cut through the thick tension in the air. You really don't want to do this. The words hung in the air like a warning. Jason's friends laughed nervously. Oh, she's talking big now, one jeered. But deep down, even they could sense there was something different about this girl. Amara's words weren't shouted. She didn't threaten. She didn't raise her voice. But the certainty in her tone carried more weight than any scream could. Jason smirked, trying to mask the unease creeping into him. And why's that? He taunted. But Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because while Jason thought this was just another act of bullying, he had no idea the storm he had just walked into. He had no idea that the girl he was trying to intimidate was the daughter of a man whose power could crush him without lifting a finger. And that silence, Amara's calm, unshaken silence, wasn't weakness. It was a warning. A warning Jason was too blind to see. Jason's grip tightened on Amara's jacket, his knuckles white with force. The crowd leaned in, waiting for the moment she would finally break. Most kids would have cried by now, begged for him to stop, or at least tried to wriggle free. That was the usual script, the one Jason loved to play out over and over again. But this time, the script had changed. Amara didn't fight him. She didn't plead. She didn't even blink. Instead, she stood still, her gaze locked on Jason's face as if she were studying him, measuring him. In that silence, it was unbearable. Jason's voice cracked with irritation. Say something. Don't just stand there. The hallway grew tense. Students whispered in hushed tones, confused by Amara's strange calmness. Why isn't she scared? She's acting like she doesn't even care. Man, Jason's losing it. Jason's friends laughed, though their voices carried a nervous edge. They slapped each other's shoulders and shouted encouragement. Show her who's boss, Jason. But inside, even they noticed something unusual. Amara wasn't reacting like any of Jason's other victims. Finally, Amara spoke, her voice low but steady. You really don't want to do this. The words weren't shouted. They weren't even said with anger. Instead, they were spoken with a chilling certainty, as if she already knew the outcome of this confrontation. Jason's smile faltered. He tried to laugh it off. And why's that? You gonna call your mommy? You gonna cry to a teacher? But Amara's expression didn't change. She simply stared back, unflinching, her silence heavier than any insult she could have thrown. Because the truth was, Amara had been raised in a world far different from the one her classmates knew. She wasn't just some new kid trying to survive high school. She was the daughter of Dante King, the man whose name carried weight in every corner of the city. A man whose empire was built on respect, loyalty, and fear. From the time she was little, Amara had been taught never to show weakness. Dante's rules were clear: fear is what they want. Control is what you give them. And once you give them control, they own you. So she never gave it. Jason didn't know it, but Amara had grown up around men twice his size, men who could silence a room just by walking in. She had watched her father negotiate deals with people who could crush entire businesses in a day. She had seen real intimidation, the kind that made grown men sweat and beg. Compared to that, Jason was nothing more than a loud child with too much arrogance and not enough wisdom. And that's why she didn't react. That's why she didn't tremble when he shoved her against the wall. Because to Amara, Jason wasn't scary. He was predictable. He was weak. The longer she remained calm, the more frustrated Jason became. His face flushed red, his jaw tightened, and his grip shook with rage. He wanted her to crack, to scream, to give him the satisfaction he was used to. But she refused. Finally, Jason leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. You think you're tough, huh? Let's see how tough you really are. Amara didn't move. She simply repeated, in that same calm tone, you don't want to do this. Jason's chest tightened. For the first time, he felt something he had never felt in these situations: doubt. He couldn't explain it, but deep down, something about this girl felt different. Dangerous, even. His friends didn't notice, too busy laughing. "She's scared, bro, look at her face," one shouted. But Jason knew they were wrong. She wasn't scared. In fact, Jason was starting to think he was the one who should be. Because when someone doesn't fear you, you lose power. And right now, Jason was losing control fast. Still, his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of his friends. Not in front of the whole school. So he pushed harder, raising his voice louder, hoping to drown out that growing sense of unease. But Amara stood like stone. She wasn't going to give him what he wanted. And deep inside, Jason felt the shift. For the first time in his life, the bully wasn't in control. By the time the lunch bell rang, the entire school had heard about what happened in the hallway. Stories flew from table to table, each version more exaggerated than the last. Jason shoved the new girl against the wall. "Nah," she shoved him back. "Bro, didn't you hear? Man, she just stood there. Didn't even blink. Like she wasn't scared at all." Everywhere Amara walked, eyes followed her. Some were curious, others impressed, but most were cautious. Students weren't used to anyone standing up to Jason, or worse, making him look powerless. Amara, however, moved through the cafeteria like nothing had happened. She grabbed her lunch tray, found a quiet corner, and began eating alone. Her calmness only added to the mystery. The whispers grew louder. Jason sat at a nearby table, surrounded by his friends, but he wasn't laughing the way he usually did. His food sat untouched. His jaw clenched, his mind replaying the moment in the hallway over and over again. Why hadn't she been afraid? Why did she look at him like that? For the first time, Jason wasn't sure if he had one. Meanwhile, Amara's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and felt a slight smile tug at her lips. It was a message from her father. "Heard about school. You okay? Dad." Amara's fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she typed back. "I'm fine. Don't worry." But Dante King wasn't a man who brushed things off. He was a father, yes, but he was also someone who had built an empire on information. Nothing slipped past him. He had men watching every corner of the city, and word of someone laying hands on his daughter had already reached his ears before she replied. Amara thought her short message would settle his concern. She didn't want him involved. She knew what her father was capable of, and the last thing she wanted was for a schoolyard incident to turn into something bigger. But Dante King had lived too long in a world where a single act of disrespect could spiral into chaos. For him, this wasn't just about a bully at school. This was about his daughter's safety. That evening, while Amara quietly did her homework at the dining table, Dante sat in his office, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, calm, and commanding. "Find out who the boy is," he said. "I want everything. Family, history, where he lives. And make it quiet." The man on the other end answered with a simple, "Yes, sir." To Dante, this wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. He had built his life on knowing threats before they had a chance to grow. And if someone thought they could intimidate his daughter, he needed to know who, and why. Back at school, the tension only grew. Students avoided Jason in the halls, whispering about how weird the whole thing had been. And Amara, despite her calm exterior, could feel the shift in the air. Something was coming. And Jason had no idea how much trouble he had just invited into his life. The next morning, Ridgeway High buzzed with tension. The story of Jason and Amara hadn't died down, in fact, it had grown bigger overnight. By now, some students swore that Amara had threatened Jason, others claimed she'd smiled at him like she wasn't afraid, and a few even whispered that she had powerful family backing her. Jason tried to brush it off. He strutted through the halls, cracking jokes and shoving smaller kids, pretending nothing was wrong. But deep down, he felt the unease crawling in his stomach. Every time he thought of Amara's steady gaze, that same unsettling chill ran down his spine. By mid-morning, something happened that none of the students, or teachers, would ever forget. A sleek black SUV rolled up to the front of the school. Its tinted windows reflected the morning sunlight, hiding whoever was inside. Slowly, the driver stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his suit sharp and perfectly pressed. He walked around to the passenger door and opened it with precision. Out stepped Dante King. His presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere. Conversations died mid-sentence. A group of seniors near the entrance froze, eyes wide. Even the teachers peeking out from the windows stiffened, their instincts warning them that this was not just another parent coming in for a routine visit. Dante walked with deliberate calm, each step echoing against the pavement. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, cold, sharp, calculating, scanned the building like a predator sizing up its surroundings. Students watching from inside felt their hearts race without knowing why. This was a man who didn't need to shout to demand respect. His silence did all the talking. When Dante entered the school, the principal rushed forward nervously, adjusting his tie. "Mr. King." "What a surprise, we weren't expecting." Dante didn't even glance at him. "Where's my daughter?" His voice was low, steady, but there was something in it that made the principal step aside instantly. Within minutes, Dante was walking through the main hallway. Students parted around him as though pulled back by an invisible force. The whispers spread like wildfire. "That's her dad? Who is that guy? He looks scary." Finally, Dante reached Amara, who was standing near her locker, watching the scene unfold with calm eyes. For the first time, his expression softened. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, princess?" he asked quietly. Amara nodded. "I'm fine, Dad." But Dante wasn't satisfied with just her words. His gaze lifted, scanning the crowd, until it landed directly on Jason. The bully's face drained of color. He froze, caught in Dante's piercing stare. "You," Dante said, his tone sharp but controlled, "step forward." Jason's legs felt like they were weighed down by cement. His friends slipped back into the crowd, abandoning him without hesitation. Slowly, Jason took a few steps forward, his throat dry, his heart hammering in his chest. Dante leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice so that every word carried power. "You think it's brave to put your hands on a girl? My daughter?" Jason stuttered, I didn't mean." Dante cut him off with a raised hand. His eyes narrowed, and the hallway went completely silent. Jason realized in that moment that he hadn't just messed with a new student. He had stepped into a world far beyond his control. Jason's entire body trembled as he stood before Dante King. The bully who once ruled the hallways now looked like a frightened child, stripped of his arrogance. His friends, who had once cheered him on, had vanished into the crowd, unwilling to be linked to him now that real danger stood in front of them. Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded silence. Every student in the hallway leaned in, holding their breath. "You're lucky," Dante said calmly, his eyes locked on Jason's. "Lucky I'm not the man I used to be. Back then, disrespect like this had consequences." Jason swallowed hard, his knees nearly buckling. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the weight of Dante's words pressed against him like a heavy stone. Dante leaned closer, lowering his voice so that only Jason could hear. "But make no mistake, if you ever touch my daughter again, you won't just be dealing with school discipline. You'll be dealing with me." Jason nodded frantically, his pride shattered. "Why yes, sir. I understand." Dante straightened, his expression unreadable, before turning back to Amara. The moment his eyes met hers, his hard exterior softened. He gently placed an arm around her shoulders. "Come on, princess. Let's go." Together, they walked down the hall, past rows of stunned students and teachers who didn't dare move. Whispers followed them, but no one spoke too loudly. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something far bigger than a simple school fight. For Jason, the lesson was clear: power wasn't about size, or fear, or how many people laughed at your jokes. Real power came from respect. And he had none left. For the rest of the students, the story spread like wildfire. They talked about the quiet girl who didn't flinch, the father whose presence silenced the entire school, and the bully who had finally been broken without a single punch being thrown. And for Amara, she carried herself the same way she always had, calm, composed, and unshaken. Because when your father is Dante King, you don't need to prove anything. Respect follows you. That day, the students of Ridgeway High learned a truth they would never forget. You never know who someone really is, until it's too late. And that's how one school bully learned a lesson he'll remember for the rest of his life. You never know who you're messing with. Respect isn't taken, it's earned. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit like, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one. Your support helps us bring you more content every day.